Go and become something.
Sis, I promise I won't let you down. Thank you for all you did.
I know you won't. Safe travels.
And there the promise was made. The day finally arrived. He's going to be great, she told herself. Only if she knew. The day their parents died, the rain fell in sheets so thick it looked like the sky itself was mourning. A burst tire on the Benin-Ore expressway, a truck that appeared from nowhere, two bodies that were barely recognizable by the time the rescue workers arrived. Chioma was 23. David was 16. She remembered standing at the mortuary, her hand gripping her brother's shoulder while he shook like a reed in harmattan wind, and making a silent promise to the cold air around her. I will not let them down. I will not let him fall. Their relatives came to the burial the way Nigerian relatives always do, in loud colors with louder opinions and empty hands. Uncle Emeka suggested David come live with him in Warri. Auntie Ngozi thought Chioma should marry quickly before she became too old and too proud. Cousin Tunde ate more than anyone and offered nothing. Within a week, the uncles and aunties had dispersed like harmattan dust, leaving behind only condolence envelopes with barely enough to cover the funeral costs. Chioma buried her parents, buried her grief, and went back to work. She had been a secretary at a logistics company in Lagos, earning 45,000 naira a month, a salary that had been fine when it was supplementary, ruinous now that it had to stretch across rent, feeding, David's school fees, and the quiet emergencies that poverty threw at you like stones. She took a second job cleaning offices at night. She sold her mother's jewelry piece by piece, each gold earring a small surrender, each beaded necklace a goodbye. She moved them both into a single room in Mushin, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments in full detail, and the ceiling fan wobbled with the existential crisis of something that had been running for 20 years too long. But David was brilliant. That was the thing. He was the kind of brilliance that made teachers call his name with a particular pride. The kind that made strangers at school parents' meetings ask, "Which one is David Okafor? I hear he's exceptional." He won mathematics competitions. He read textbooks the way other boys read comics. When Chioma watched him study, bent over his books under their single bulb, she felt something that was equal parts love and grief. Because brilliance like his deserved more than a one-room apartment in Mushin, more than a sister who fell asleep over a ledger book, more than a life already limited by poverty before it had properly begun. When David gained admission to study engineering, Chioma wept in the bathroom so he would not see her cry. Not from sadness, but from a joy so enormous it frightened her. When 2 years into his degree, a partial scholarship opportunity emerged for a master's program in Canada, the kind that covered tuition but required the student to fund their own living expenses and visa fees, Chioma did not hesitate. She calculated. She planned. She sacrificed. She sold the small plot of land their father had left in the village, the one she had privately hoped to someday build on. She cashed out her meager pension contributions. She borrowed from 3 different cooperative societies and signed her name to repayment schedules that would follow her for years. She gave up her own plans to study part-time for a professional accounting qualification because the course fees were now David's visa fees. The morning she drove David to Murtala Mohammed Airport, he held her hands outside the departure gate and looked at her with those serious, brilliant eyes. "Chioma," he said, "I will not forget this. I swear to God, I will not forget what you've done." She had straightened his collar the way she imagined their mother would have, smiled with everything she had and said, "Just make us proud." She stood at the airport long after he disappeared through the doors, watching the space where he had been. Then she drove home to Mushin, sat in the room that was suddenly too quiet, and began the long business of rebuilding a life.
Hey sis, it's going great here in Canada. The campus is beautiful with all the autumn colors. My classes are so interesting, especially engineering. I miss you all, but I'm loving it.
For the first year, David called every Sunday. He described Canada with the wide-eyed enthusiasm of someone who had stepped into a different dimension. The orderliness, the cold that bit through 3 layers of clothing, the university library that never closed, the flatmates from 6 different countries. He sent occasional small amounts of money, nothing significant, but enough to signal that he remembered. Chioma would sit with her phone pressed to her ear, listening to his voice across the distance, and feel that the sacrifice had been worth it. The calls began in the second year. Every Sunday became every other Sunday, then once a month, then sporadic. A voice note here, a WhatsApp message there, always brief, always cheerful, always somehow managing to say nothing of real substance. He graduated. He got a job. He began building what he called a life over here. The messages grew shorter as his life grew bigger. By the 3rd year, Chioma noticed the pattern, but refused to name it. When he didn't call after she was hospitalized for a week with typhoid, a sickness she'd pushed too far by walking through the early symptoms, she told herself he was busy. When she mentioned the cooperative loan repayments were strangling her, and he responded with a voice note saying, hang in there, things are tight on my end too. She swallowed her response and typed back a simple, okay. She told herself she was not keeping score. She told herself he was still finding his feet. But the truth she refused to look at directly was this. David had found his feet. He had found them, planted them firmly in a new life, and quietly walked away from everything that reminded him of where he had come from, including her. It was Mrs. Adeji from the next compound who first said aloud what Chioma had been refusing to think. "That's your brother," Adeji said one evening, shelling beans on her veranda. "He don't forget you people, oh. Not so them do. They reach abroad, they change. The overseas air enter their head." "He's just busy," Chioma said automatically. Adeji looked at her the way older women look at younger ones who are lying to themselves, with a patience that was more painful than any argument. "Busy," Adeji repeated. "Okay." The word sat in Chioma's chest like a stone. That night, she pulled out the loan repayment schedule she kept folded in her Bible and looked at the numbers honestly for the first time in months. She had 2 more years of repayments. She had missed 1 cooperative meeting because she couldn't make the contribution. She was 31 years old, living in the same 1-room apartment, her savings non-existent, her future a flat line. And the brother she had bet everything on was posting photographs on Instagram. She had found his account by accident through a colleague's cousin, of a life that looked like a magazine. A well-furnished apartment, weekend trips, a car, a woman she'd never been introduced to. She did not cry. She was surprised to find she did not cry. She simply sat with the knowledge for a long time, and then she folded the repayment schedule back into her Bible, turned off the wobbling fan, and lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of Mushin, thinking about the version of herself that existed before she gave everything away.
Hey cuz, How's Canada?
I'm fine.
Then the real emergencies began. Their uncle Emeka, the one who had offered nothing at the funeral, had a son, Tobena, who was genuinely close to David in a way the rest of the family was not. Tobena had kept in touch across the years and was among the few who had David's direct number. When Tobena's mother, Auntie Patience, collapsed with a stroke and the family needed to make quick decisions about medical bills and coordinating care, it was Tobena who tried to reach David fast. David didn't pick up. Chioma tried next, straight to voicemail. She sent a message marked urgent. 2 days passed. A voice note arrived, 15 seconds long. So sorry to hear. I'll try and send something small when I can. It's a difficult month for me financially.
A difficult month. He sent 7,000 naira, the equivalent of roughly $5 at the rate it arrived, and disappeared back into his life. Chioma stood in the corridor of Lagos Island General Hospital, looked at the transfer alert on her phone, and laughed. Not from amusement, from something that had no other exit. She paid Auntie Patience's initial bills herself. Not because she owed Auntie Patience anything, not because the woman had ever been particularly kind to her, but because she was the one who was there. Because absence was a choice, and presence came with its own tax.
David has abandoned this family.
He has changed since he traveled to Canada. This is not the David we know.
We must find a way to reach him.
Word spread among the extended family. David has changed. People said it in the clucking, regretful tones of those who find tragedy satisfying. Abroad has taken him. Chioma defended him out of habit, even as she stopped believing her own defenses. She built a careful life around the empty space he had left. A life of work, of small pleasures, of being the person her community relied on, of learning slowly to find meaning in her own survival rather than in his success. She got promoted. She moved to a slightly better apartment. She began, haltingly, to study again. She did not wait for David. Waiting, she had finally understood, was a form of putting yourself on hold for someone who had pressed play on their own life and was no longer watching your screen. 4 years passed, then 5. Then, on an idle Thursday evening, she received a message from Tobena. Chioma, David is coming home. He'll be in Lagos for 2 weeks, something about wanting to see the family. He says he'll call you. She read the message 3 times. Then she set her phone down and went back to the book she was reading, her face very still, her heartbeat carefully controlled. She would see him. She would be civil, because she was Chioma, and civility was bone deep in her. But she was no longer the woman who stood at the airport, watching the space where he used to be. That woman had waited long enough. David Okafor landed at Murtala Mohammed Airport on a Tuesday morning in November, stepping off the plane with the particular ease of a man who had grown accustomed to better airports. He was 30, sharp-looking in a way that Lagos wealth recognized and approved of. Tailored jacket, wireless earphones, carry-on luggage that cost more than Chioma's monthly salary. He smelled of a life that had expanded in all the ways he'd intended. He moved through arrivals with his phone in his hand, already composing the post in his head. Home for a bit. Nigeria, you have me for 2 weeks. He had told himself this trip was about reconnecting. He had told himself in the comfortable, self-serving narrative of a man who had spent 5 years avoiding discomfort, that he had simply been busy building a foundation, and that now that he had built it, he would come back and share it. He would take Chioma to a nice dinner. He would give her money, real money this time. He would smooth everything over because David had always been good at charm, and charm, in his experience, could settle most debts. He did not understand yet that some debts have stopped waiting to be settled. He did not understand yet what was coming. But Lagos, that ancient, unforgiving city that has swallowed the proud since before any of them were born, was already watching him arrive. And the city had a long, patient memory.